Hi, this is Radical Markets. I'm Galen, and on today's episode we're going to talk about how the Federal Reserve corrodes our economy by manipulating interest rates. So for those of you who don't know, the Federal Reserve is the national bank of the United States. It has two mission objectives, or as they call it, it has a dual mandate. And this mandate is to maintain stable prices and to achieve maximum employment. These two objectives come into conflict. Right now, if you don't know, we're still kind of recovering from a recession, and the employment picture in the United States is a mixed bag. Right now, the unemployment rate is at a record low since 2007 at least, at around 5.4% or something in that range. However, at the same time, the composition of these jobs has been deteriorating. So the United States has been losing manufacturing jobs and gaining a lot of restaurant jobs or service sector jobs. And additionally, we're moving from full-time to part-time jobs. So even though a large percentage of people have jobs, they might not be working as long of hours as they wish to. The Federal Reserve wants to achieve full employment through its policies. The problem is the Federal Reserve has a very limited amount of tools it can work with. Its primary tool for achieving its goals is to change the interest rate in the economy. So the Federal Reserve can basically move the average interest rate in the economy by changing the amount of loans that it gives to commercial banks and also the federal government. Currently, the Federal Reserve is maintaining a loose policy, which means that it is lending quite a lot of capital out at very low interest rates. If you watched my last video on interest rates, you should know that normally in a market economy, interest rates are determined by the amount of savings in an economy. So if there's a large pool of savings, then there's a large pool of money available to be loaned out. This high supply leads to a low price or a low interest rate. However, the Federal Reserve is able to change interest rates regardless of whether there's a high savings rate in the economy. So at the moment, the savings rate in the US is at a very low point. If you look at this graphic, you can see that interest rates right now, the savings rate is around 2%. Normally, when there's such a low savings rate, there should also be a high interest rate. A high interest rate creates an incentive for Americans or citizens of other countries to save more money and bring the savings rate back up to a healthy level that can support a robust financial sector that's able to give out loans and allow businesses to access capital to make more innovation. Unfortunately, it is not United States policy to allow interest rates to fluctuate with the supply of savings. Instead, the United States has set up the Federal Reserve to change interest rates in response to the economic cycle. So currently, we're in a recession. The Federal Reserve's job in a recession is to lower interest rates in order to stimulate spending. When the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, it allows demand for loans to rise. It becomes less risky for a borrower to take on a loan. Now, a borrower takes out a loan to buy something. You don't take out a loan to save. So by allowing more lenders to borrow more money in order to buy more expensive houses or to buy more used cars or more student loans, the Federal Reserve generates spending throughout the economy. By setting a low interest rate while the savings rate is so low, the Federal Reserve is setting us up for disaster. So a low interest rate doesn't just cause problems for borrowing, increasing the rate of borrowing. It also creates problems for people who want to save money. A lot of people won't be satisfied with just getting 0.5% or 1% a year on their savings account and will turn to investing in real estate or stocks, which are much riskier financial assets. Over the long term, real estate and stocks have historically outperformed savings accounts. However, they are more vulnerable to ups and downs in the market. Even crazier than investing in stocks and mortgages, which have some productive capacity, some savers are drawn to things like collectibles in order to try to get a higher rate of return than they would get on their savings account. Just this year, we had a record sale on a painting that was by French artist Zimbabwean for $300 million. I'm going to show the painting. It doesn't really look like much to me. These record-breaking sales are a product of low interest rate policy and people looking to put their money into things besides money things besides savings accounts in order to get a better rate of return. Another reason this is toxic is because collectible paintings or old cars don't produce additional value. A savings account, the money the bank gets from that savings account, they might loan out to a small business who then uses that money to create something productive. But that doesn't happen when people are hoarding their money and putting in the collectibles, buying even gold and silver, which I'm an advocate of, is not as productive an asset as a loan to a business. And though it stores value, it doesn't create new value. It would be okay for people to be investing in real estate and stocks if the savings rate was also high. A high savings rate would mean that people have a large financial cushion in order to absorb the shocks when loans go bad. However, as I already stated and showed in the graph, the savings rate is incredibly low right now. So the Federal Reserve is setting people up to borrow a lot of money by keeping interest rates low, and at the same time, they're allowing these conditions to continue when the savings rate is low and people aren't prepared to absorb a financial shock like what we had in 2008. These conditions are remarkably similar to what we had in 2008. The interest rate dictated by the Federal Reserve has been at historically low numbers since 2001. Many economists think that that is what fueled the housing crisis. Now, currently, since 2007, there has not been the same kind of overinvestment by private households in real estate. However, we can see that there are a lot of loans being generated in other parts of the economy. Just as the Federal Reserve dictates interest rates for private loans, it also controls the interest rate of government loans. So many people may have seen in the news that the national debt is at record highs. It's currently above $18 trillion. I believe it was around 13 trillion when George Bush left office, and maybe 9 trillion when George Bush entered. Both parties have had a significant role in increasing the national debt. I don't really want to get into that right now. But the national debt is subject to the same interest rate as other debt in the economy. So currently, we're only paying, as a country, 1% interest on our national debt. That is only possible as long as people are willing to keep buying loans from the Federal Reserve. Currently, the interest rate on the national debt is about 1% or so. This is historically low. Usually the interest rate is around 3 or 4%. Any interest that the national debt is accruing is something that has to be paid by taxpayers. If the interest rate were to go back up to 3 or 4%, some economists have estimated that the interest on the debt would be as large as the sum of all tax revenue taken in by the federal government in a year. That would mean that all of our tax revenue would only be able to cover the interest on the debt. There would be no money left for the military budget, for Social Security, Medicaid, or any other federal programs like food stamps. We're not in a sustainable situation. Currently, the government is able to continue borrowing at 1% interest rates. However, this is only possible as long as other market participants are also willing to loan to the US at 1%. If China and Japan were ever to decide that the United States is incapable of paying off its debts, it would surely stop lending to us. If other countries were to call our bluff in this way and say, no, the United States cannot pay back 18 trillion plus in debt, then the Federal Reserve would no longer be able to stop interest rates from rising. If the Federal Reserve were no longer able to hold interest rates low, it would be a very bleak picture for the United States. As I said before, we would no longer be able to borrow to obtain funding in order to pay for programs like Social Security, Medicare, and the military, all kinds of other federal programs. This is exactly what's going on in Greece right now. So you may have seen pictures of riots, lines at ATMs, or heard stories about record suicide rates in Greece. This has all been happening since the government was forced to start cutting all of its programs because they were no longer able to obtain loans to cover their debt. For a long time, Greece had been paying off its debt using other loans, just as the United States is doing at the moment. Unfortunately for Greece, they don't have a national bank, so they weren't able to continue loaning to themselves using their national bank. We have that privilege. However, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's going to allow us to go down this road for longer, but it won't allow us to go down the road forever. We can't fund 100% of our government on loans from our own bank. We need other sources in order to stabilize the value of the dollar. So unfortunately, I don't really have any solutions to this problem. We've already accrued $18 trillion in debt. Though the government can't really fix this problem at this point, there are things you can do personally. You can buy other currencies, so the ultimate trajectory of this crisis, in my view, is that the United States is going to be forced to print money in order to pay for the debt, because it'll be unable to convince the voters to raise taxes in order to pay for it. In order to protect against this future, you should consider buying other currencies or gold. If you're unconvinced, you can always buy food, dry food, cans of beans or rice. That doesn't go bad, and so if you're wrong, you can still eat the food. And if you're not even convinced enough to do that, I would just suggest buying whatever you want right now. If you're saving money, you're going to get screwed. The value of the dollar is going to go down. You want to buy stuff before that happens. You want to buy, if you're saving up for a $1,600 guitar, and you plan to buy it in 3 years, I'd recommend you buy an $800 guitar now instead. Because it's unlikely that the money you're saving today is going to be worth as much in the future as it is today. I would suspect it's possible that it could lose 25% to 50% of its value in the next 5 years. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Radical Markets. Next time we're going to be talking about the Chinese stock bubble that's been bursting and how it might affect interest rates here in the United States. As well as what it means for the future of China. Does it change whether or not China might be a global power in the future? So if you're interested in that, make sure to tune back in later. And please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Leave your comments and criticisms down below. Thanks, have a great day.